Ukraine. This comes even as authorities warned participating in anti-war protests could lead to prosecution and criminal charges. Russian police have arrested over 1,700 protesters. The Ukrainian military says it is resisting Russian forces attempting to advance from the north. At least 2 Ukrainian army vehicles were seized as Russian troops tried to close in on Kyiv. The United States says it is ready to take in Ukrainian refugees and assist other European countries near Ukraine. CNN's Atika Schubert will give us the latest live from Lviv, Ukraine, later in the program. Russian forces have taken control of the Antonov air base near Kyiv as Ukrainian troops try to mount a counter-offensive. CNN's Matthew Chance was at that base and had an exclusive encounter with Russian troops.
Louis, keep inside, in here, against the wall.
How can I find it?
Right. Picture.
Focus. Should we run that way?
Right. We've got to be mindful with the driver as well, okay?
Speaking to CNN, Ukrainian officials said they are afraid Russia is planning to take the capital and replace the leadership of Ukraine with a pro-Russian government. With Russia's assault on Ukraine, Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana insists the Philippines will remain neutral for now. Our George Cahiles reports.
The Philippine government has yet to see any possible security threat to the country amid the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Reason why Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana says the Philippines will not side with either party for now.
Tayo naman, we'll just closely watch what's happening there and be prepared. Wala naman tayong pakialam doon sa Europe, sa kanilang ginagawa. Hindi naman tayo katabi ng Ukraine. Sila mismong yung mga bansang karatig ang mga nagpapahayag ng suporta kung naman, especially sa Ukraine.
As of now, Lorenzana says the military is already preparing to protect the country should the conflict reaches our shores. The Defense Secretary adds that the procurement of 16 heavy-lift choppers from Russia will still proceed as planned. Officials are actually worried about the impact of the increasing petroleum prices in the world market due to the war. Ukraine is among the biggest oil suppliers in Europe.
Para yung nangyayari sa kapaligiran, lalo't higit sa Ukraine, ay magkaroon tayo ng peaceful settlement kasi tatamaan at tatamaan tayo dyan. Bakit? Ang Ukraine supplier ng crudo yan, supplier ng... Kung may gulo dyan, di tataas yung presyo.
Hindi pa nga nag-umpisa yung mga kaguluhan noon, itong mga nakaraang linggo, tumataas na yung mga yung halaga ng langis. Bakit? Kasi yung mga bansa na they are expecting some troubles are already stockpiling, buying furiously the oil so that they can stockpile and have some yung buffer if things go wrong. So, dapat ganoon din tayo, maghanda tayo dahil tatamaan talaga tayo rito.
The Foreign Affairs Department is calling on the international community to reaffirm its commitment to peaceful resolution of disputes. In a statement, the DFA says countries must exert efforts to resolve issues through peaceful and diplomatic means to avert humanitarian crisis, like what's stated in the Manila Declaration of Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
In a tweet, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Locsin says he's flying to Warsaw to personally check on Filipinos at the Ukrainian border. Poland has agreed to welcome Filipinos fleeing Ukraine even without a visa, according to Secretary Locsin. The stage is all set for CNN Philippines' back-to-back presidential and vice presidential debates this weekend. Tristan Odalo gives us a sneak peek.
CNN Philippines is back at the University of Santo Tomas for the presidential and vice presidential debates this weekend. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, expect changes. This building across the UST Quadricentennial Pavilion will serve as holding room for candidates and their teams. Upon arrival here at the UST Engineering Building, candidates and their teams will have to undergo the basic health screening process, including temperature checks and the use of hand sanitizers, and then they will proceed to their holding rooms. This is one of the holding rooms for the CNN Philippines presidential and vice presidential debate. In order to follow the minimum health standards, candidates can only bring 10 members of their team to avoid overcrowding. Medical teams will also be on standby. People who will be on site should present negative COVID-19 test results.
I'm really very excited to find out what our vice presidential candidates will say about the various issues that are besetting our country. Alam mo naman ngayon, marami tayong mga problema from COVID-19 to jobless Filipinos, to the economy, to peace and order. So kailangan natin malaman sa ating mga vice presidential candidates how they will be involved with the next president of the Philippines, because they're not just a spare tire, they're just a heartbeat away from the presidency.
One major difference from past debates, no live audience. Walk-ins will not be allowed and there will be no LED screens on display outside the venue. But the public will get the chance to view the event virtually. There will be an audience that will come from different sectors, including women, LGBT, the academe, and youth. A number of voters are excited to watch their candidates and hear about their plans for the country.
Solusyon ng mga presidente sa mga nangyayari sa atin. Katulad yan ngayon, pandemic. So since pandemic, para matapos to, ano yung mga dapat na gawin nila, ganun. Tapos marinig din yung mga boses ng mga nasa ibabang mga tao.
Mga rider po mas gusto po namin malaman yung tungkol po sa pagtaas ng gas. Paano po namin po may budget po sa amin. Napakataas po talaga ng gas ngayon. Minsan po, yung one day po namin na kinikita, minsan sa gas na lang po napupunta.
9 presidential candidates and 7 vice presidential bets will face off here at the UST Quadricentennial Pavilion over the weekend. Side by side, they will present their plans and visions for the country and address issues that matter most to Filipinos in one stage. Tristan Nodalo, CNN Philippines.
Just one more day before the CNN Philippines vice presidential debate, 7 VP candidates will stand side by side to answer the hard questions tomorrow, February 26th at 5 p.m. at the University of Santo Tomas. Also catch CNN Philippines' pre-debate special at 4:30 in the afternoon for more of what to expect ahead of the showdown. Nine presidential candidates will also face off on Sunday, February 27 at 5 p.m. also at UST. These COMELEC-accredited debates are in partnership with UST and Microsoft Philippines to help you make an informed choice come May 9th. Up ahead, today marks the 36th anniversary of the People Power Revolution. We take a look back on how Filipinos reclaimed the country's democracy. And actor and filmmaker Sean Penn is in Ukraine working on a documentary about Russia's attack on the former Soviet nation. Newsnight returns after this break.
Importante yun kasi mas makikita ng mga citizens, ng mga voters, yung kung ano yung naturang platform and yung kung sino ba talaga yung mas dapat iboto bilang president.
Importante para malaman natin kung ano ba yung mga plano nila, yung mga plataforma nila sa ating bansa pagka nahalal sila.
Opo, importante po yun. Kasi para malaman natin kung ano mga layunin nila sa pamahalaan ng Pilipinas.
Meron tayong mga tumatakbo na ngayon lang umusbong simula nung magkandidato na, pero yung simula nung pandemic wala naman talagang naigawa eh. Pero para sa akin talaga, gusto namin malaman kung ano ba yung mga balak nila talaga sa buong Pilipinas. Kapag may mga debate po na mangyayari po, lalo na sa social media na ipapalabas, nakaantabay na po talaga kami manood.
Welcome back. It was a busy day at the People Power Monument as the country marked the 36th anniversary of the historic EDSA revolution. Stanley Gaheta made the rounds and filed this report.
Today marks the 36th anniversary of the EDSA People Power Revolution. The country's triumph over tyranny remains at the heart of its commemoration.
Ang EDSA kasi is about changes through peaceful means. So, yun yung maganda doon, no, na ang isang malaking problema, issue, conflict na resolved through peaceful means.
Manila Cathedral also tolled its bells, symbolizing the gift of achieving change through prayers.
Historians say that the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution was the country's game-changing victory against tyranny. And because of that, the Philippines became an inspiration to the whole world after it restored democracy in bloodless and peaceful means.
While remembering the bloodless revolution, various groups at the People Power Monument attended a rally by activists, church leaders, and victims of martial law. Their aim is to debunk myths about Marcos' leadership and the status of the country during the dictatorship. Speakers shared some facts about martial law.
Kung walang ninakaw, bakit may nababawing nakaw na yaman? Kabawi tayo ng 170 billion pesos as of 2016. Ayon sa record ng PCGG, saan galing pala yun? Saan lang, basta na lang lumitaw?
Kailangan yung mamamayang Pilipino na dapat ay hindi kinakalimutan yung kasaysayan natin, ano? Kung paano natin winakasan yung madilim na karanasan natin ng diktadorang gobyerno, no?
Ang hindi ko makakalimutan ay ang sa gitna ng paghasik ng lagim, sa gitna ng malawakan na korupsyon, sa gitna ng walang habas na pagpapasasa ng mga Marcoses, ano? Ay ang determinasyon ng mga Pilipino na labanan ng diktadura.
Historians believe Filipinos should not blame the People Power event on what happened after the revolution. A bugging question remains, what have we Filipinos really learned from that part of our history? Stanley Gahete, CNN Philippines.
Catholic bishops warn Filipinos against historical revisionism and disinformation on martial law, especially in the run-up to the May polls. AC Nichols reports.
The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines is making a stand against what it calls radical distortions about the Marcos regime, noting that people referring to that period as the golden years are lying. In a pastoral letter issued on the 36th anniversary of the People Power Revolution, the CBCP rejects efforts to downplay human rights abuses, corruption, and economic slump during the regime of former dictator Ferdinand Marcos. As the 2022 elections near, the group says it is not endorsing a specific candidate, but urged Filipinos to side with the truth.
Labanan naman natin yung nagsasabi ng hindi totoo. At kung malinaw sa inyo kung sino ang hindi nagsasabi ng totoo, di wag iboto yun. Ang iboto natin yung pumapanig talaga doon sa totoo.
The son of the late dictator, former Senator Bongbong Marcos, is dominating pre-election surveys. He usually evades questions about the martial rule and People Power Revolution, saying these issues happened many moons ago. But his supporters are known to push the narrative that the martial law period marked the country's economic golden age. Asked if they were alluding to Marcos supporters, the CBCP says it's only after the truth.
Kung sila ay tinamaan, baka totoo, no? Because ang pinatatamaan lang naman natin dito, ang tinutumbok talaga natin ay yung totoong nangyari. Huwag lang nating babaluktutin yung totoong nangyari.
The CBCP insists it remains non-partisan, but never neutral. David even lauded religious groups who have united behind a common candidate, such as the Couples for Christ and the Lasallian Brothers, who openly endorsed the candidacy of Vice President Leni Robredo. AC Nichols, CNN Philippines.
Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte will not attend the vice presidential debate sponsored by the Commission on Elections. Her team did not explain why. Duterte's spokesperson, Liloan Mayor Cristina Frasco, says the presidential daughter did not receive a formal invitation to attend COMELEC's first VP debate on March 20th, despite an earlier announcement from the poll body. But Frasco notes that Duterte won't participate either way. The team of Duterte's running mate, Bongbong Marcos, also said the former senator has not confirmed his attendance in the COMELEC's first presidential debate on March 19th. COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez earlier said all presidential and vice presidential candidates have committed to joining the event, except for VP Bet Lito Atienza, who is recovering from his knee surgery. Similar to more developed countries, televised debates now play a key role in our nation's election cycles. Why are these political showdowns important for both candidates and voters? Senior correspondent David Santos reports.
When Rodrigo Duterte and Leni Robredo were elected in 2016, their performances during televised debates were widely viewed as having played a crucial role in their victories.
I think debates are important because they allow voters to access candidates' platforms in a comparative way.
London-based Filipino debate expert and rights advocate Sharmila Parmanan explains why live candidate face-offs have become an election staple just like in other countries.
But second, it also creates a more accountable public culture and political culture, because the signal it gives to political candidates is you need to explain yourself. You need to justify yourself. And we create a culture where people are willing to ask questions and willing to challenge policies.
More than just presenting their platforms in equal opportunity, political debates primarily help voters make informed choices.
Kasi gusto nating ma-empower yung voters eh. So para pagdating ng election day, sigurado sila na matalino yung magiging desisyon nila, na pinag-isipan nila yung magiging desisyon nila.
Parmanan says voters should watch out for motherhood statements and empty promises.
So don't look for candidates that promise the moon and the stars.
Fact-check their claims and keep an eye on their demeanor.
Look at their unscripted answers as well, which can indicate some things about their temperament. How do they characterize their opponents? Are they able to accept criticism?
A live audience can make a spectacle out of a political showdown, but since we're still in a pandemic, tech giant Microsoft, through its Microsoft Teams technology, will set up a virtual audience that will take part in the two-day CNN Philippines debates.
It will enable a more human feel to it, bringing the energy of a virtual audience into the mix and allowing for a more personal interaction between the candidates and our audience. Microsoft really feels a strong responsibility to ensure that the democratic process is upheld for every Filipino.
CNN-PH and Microsoft have been working for months on this project, hoping to bridge the voters and the candidates in this historic election. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
Mientras la crisis en Rusia.
We return to our top story. The Russian assault on Ukraine continues as explosions and air sirens ring out in Kiev and other key cities as early as 7 in the morning. European leaders announced tougher sanctions to punish Russia, while other nations continue to condemn the aggression. Ukraine says it is resisting attempts by Russian troops to advance on the capital. CNN's Atika Schubert tells us more about this war live from the city of Lviv. Atika, tell us what is happening there and any update on the casualties.
Well, I don't know if you can hear this right now. The air raid sirens are going off in Lviv. We had several this morning, and we had some yesterday, but this is the first time we've seen it this late in the day. Normally, what seems to be a pattern here for the last 2 days is we hear this air raid siren early in the morning, and that indicates possible missile strikes in the area. We know that 2 airfields were hit over the last 2 days, but this one now is a bit unusual. Seems to be dying down now. People are supposed to seek shelter when they hear that air raid siren. Churches have become designated safe places for a lot of people here. We saw one kid running to get home to safety. So things are nervous here, but they're not in any way as bad as they are in Kiev, in the capital, where fighting is ongoing. The Ukrainian defense minister has come out saying that Russian reconnaissance forces have now entered the northern districts of the capital, and he actually put out a tweet urging residents to make Molotov cocktails, in his words, and to fight the occupiers. Our own crew on the ground there also saw civilians fleeing heavy fighting. So the situation appears to be quite chaotic in Kiev. And in answer to your question on casualties, we know from the Ukrainian president who addressed the public today, early this morning, in a Facebook message, that we have 137 casualties so far, although we do expect that number to rise, Mai.
Well, Atika, there were protests earlier today. Tell us, how are Russians reacting to this conflict?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, to protest in Russia against the war in Ukraine is a very courageous act. As we saw, a number of people had already been arrested, but that didn't stop people from coming out, especially in St. Petersburg, where you saw these huge crowds coming out against this war. And I think that goes to show it's a sign, perhaps, of public opinion in Russia that this is not a popular war. It's not clear how much public backing Russian President Vladimir Putin has. And I think you have to keep in mind that many Russians feel very close to Ukraine. Many Ukrainians feel that even though they don't want to be a part of Russia, they feel quite close to Russia. They see each other as sort of brothers. So this is a war and a conflict that I think really hits home for Russians especially.
Well, Atika, European leaders have announced tougher sanctions to punish Russia while other nations continue to condemn the aggression. Can you tell us any new steps taken by world leaders?
Well, certainly Ukraine is hoping for all the help it can get, especially sanctions. And what Ukraine wants to see is the full power of sanctions being imposed on Russia now. What Ukraine wants to see is the world isolating Russia, punishing it for this attack on the country. Specifically, Ukraine would like to see Russian banks being prevented from operating in the international system, meaning, for example, their transfers on the SWIFT system would not be able to go forward. This is what Ukraine would like to see. The reality is the United States and European allies are putting in tough sanctions, but they're still holding back some of the even tougher ones. And I think that's because they're hoping that this will be enough to deter Russia, and they're holding some back for extra leverage later. But as you can imagine, many here in Ukraine want to see the maximum being imposed now.
To you and your team, Atika, thank you for that report, and do stay safe. That was CNN international correspondent Atika Schubert, live from Lviv, Ukraine. World-famous actor Sean Penn is working on a documentary in Ukraine as Russia began its assault. The office of the president says Penn came to Kiev to tell the world the truth about what's happening. The star has met with President Zelensky for the project, and Variety reports the documentary is being done with Vice Studios. Vice Media Group confirmed the project but wouldn't say if Penn was involved. More stories ahead. Almost 3 years since closing its doors, this famous amusement park in Pasay City is back. And the first game for Gilas in this month's FIBA qualifiers has kicked off. We get you up to date on how the match against India is unfolding. Welcome back. On the hard court, Gilas Pilipinas is well into their first match for the FIBA qualifiers February window. The national men's basketball team is facing India, with Gilas taking the lead at 26-19. The Philippines currently holds a 1-0 record after yesterday's default win because of South Korea's withdrawal. Here's the lineup for Gilas players for this match, which includes returning Japanese B-League imports Thirdy Ravena, Dwight Ramos, and Juan Gomez Deliano. Regardless of the results of the qualifiers, the Philippines is already through to next year's FIBA World Cup as one of the host countries. On to another league after a 2-year break because of the pandemic. The UAAP is finally making a comeback. Season 84 formally opens on March 26th, featuring men's 5-on-5 and 3-on-3 basketball, women's volleyball, cheer dance, pumse and volleyball, and also chess. Speaking of comebacks, Star City's thrilling rides and attractions are open to the public once again. The theme park in Pasay reopened yesterday, nearly 3 years since a fire in October 2019. Following renovations, Star City is up and running again, operating from Thursday to Sunday, 12 to 8 p.m. Again, join us this weekend as we help you get to know your candidates. Catch 7 out of 9 vice presidential candidates in our debate on Saturday, February 26th at 5 p.m. live at the University of Santo Tomas. And watch 9 out of 10 candidates face off at the presidential debate on Sunday, February 27th, 5 p.m. also at UST, only here on CNN Philippines. And that's it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Ida Rodriguez sitting in for Pia Ontiveros. This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
For many of us, we communicate with each other through our voice. Think about how much you talk every day, at home, at work, or even when you're on the phone. We spend so much time using our voice, but spend very little time caring for it. This is why most of us have experienced a raspy or strained voice at some point. It's especially prevalent among voice professionals like performers, call center agents, teachers, as well as reporters, but it can happen to anyone. On the program today, we'll talk about ways to care for your voice, the different voice problems that you may encounter, and how best to treat them. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk right here on CNN Philippines. Your voice plays a vital role in your everyday life, but it's easy to take for granted. Our guests are here today to give us some tips on how to help keep our voices strong and healthy. With us is Dr. Enrique Papa II, who is an ENT specialist at UniHealth Parañaque Hospital and Medical Center, as well as Hospital ng Maynila. Also with us is Zarina Camille Lazaro. She's a speech-language pathologist from St. Luke's Global City and an instructor of speech pathology at UP Manila. All of us, even from the time we were born, second only to gaining that first breath, gumamit na tayo ng boses natin when we cried, ano? But a lot of us take it for granted, hindi natin inaalagaan. Dr. Enrique, pag-usapan natin, how exactly do we produce sound that eventually becomes our voice, and why is it so distinct? Parang itong fingerprint ng mga tao, iba-ibang mga boses ng tao.
Well, basically for us to produce voice, we need three things, no? First is the power supply, which is the air coming from the lungs. Second is the sound source, which is our larynx, which contains our vocal cords. And third is the resonator, which includes our oral cavity, the nasopharynx, and the sinuses. So basically, for us to produce sounds, the air coming from the lungs is the one that produces the power behind the voice production. The air moves up and down the trachea or the windpipe, thus producing vibration of the vocal cords. The vibration of the vocal cords then tends to produce the sound, which then resonates in our sinuses, oral cavity, or the pharynx, thus shaping and amplifying the sounds. And with the use of our soft palate, the tongue, the mouth, the lips, we then transform these sounds into speech and articulation.
Let's focus on that part where the vocal cords are situated at, no, yung larynx area natin. That's why I'd like to ask Ms. Zarina, ano yung mga ginagawa nating mga Filipinos on a regular basis na nakakapag-compromise ng quality ng voice natin?
Madami po iba-iba kasing causes on why we would have changes in our voice. Pwede rin po kasi yung mga acute na phonotrauma, which are like shouting for a long period of time, using our voice in an abusive manner, like excessive coughing or excessive throat clearing. Even din po yung mga stress that we experience at work, they may also lead to additional tensions in our neck area, which could compromise our voice.
Ms. Zarina, all of those that you mentioned, maybe some acute things, panandalian lang. Are there instances that Filipinos do for long periods of time that in the long run, makakasasama talaga ng boses?
I think Filipinos may have the tendency to talk excessively. I think it's in our culture po kasi na talaga mahilig po tayo makipagkwentuhan, makipag-usap. It's not really a problem per se, but if we talk using an improper voice or hindi po mag-ayos yung technique na ating pakikipag-usap with other people, in the long run, it may lead to voice problem.
One of the most common symptom or mararamdaman ng isang tao na may problema sa kanilang boses ay ang hoarseness. Could you explain to us what hoarseness is and what's usually the area involved when someone is hoarse?
So basically, hoarseness is a symptom of dysphonia. Dysphonia is basically a diagnosis of any changes or alteration in voice production. When we say hoarseness naman, it's basically a symptom for any change in voice quality, pitch, or loudness. Both can either be neurologic, obstructive, iatrogenic, or and most likely secondary to functional, such as vocal abuse.
How much of an impact can certain things that a person does, especially smoking and drinking of alcohol, how big of a factor is this when it comes to someone's voice?
Tobacco smoking can lead to progressive damage in the lining of the mucosa of our vocal cords. Also, smoking tends to lead to an increased mucus production, causing changes in the quality of the voice. Smoking can also predispose the patient with an increased risk of minute hemorrhages or yung mga maliliit na pagdudugo sa vocal cords, secondary to changes in pressure and circulation. And over time, of course, smoking and alcohol can lead to development of tumors or laryngeal cancers.
Now, Ms. Zarina, meron bang connection ang stress level ng isang tao sa quality ng boses niya?
Yes po, there has been research that under periods of stress, the muscles that control the larynx become excessively tense, and periods of prolonged muscle tension in the larynx can lead to incoordination of the muscles that control our voice.
So may connection talaga ang ating stress levels and the quality of our voice. But in some occasions, hoarseness can also signify a serious medical condition. We'll talk more about that when we return. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Now, losing one's voice is a symptom, as discussed earlier, but there may be several underlying reasons. A vocally demanding job or the common cold is sometimes usually to blame. If this is the case, your voice should be restored within a couple of days. But sometimes it could signify something more serious. Dr. Enrique, pag-usapan natin ang mga possible causes from something like laryngitis, for instance, as a cause for hoarseness or the loss of someone's voice. What are some of the main causes ng laryngitis, and how can this be better managed by our viewers?
When we say laryngitis, it's basically an inflammation or irritation of the larynx causing dysphonia. It could either be acute, lasting for 2 weeks, or chronic, lasting for more than 2 weeks. Here in the Philippines, because of the advent of the BPO industry, the most common cause of laryngitis is vocal abuse. Other causes would include your respiratory tract infections, such as cough and colds, infections such as TB, and also reflux or gastroesophageal reflux disease.
In case, Dr. Enrique, nakapag-voice rest na ang ating mga viewers, but the persistence of hoarseness is still there. Garalgal ang boses niya, very raspy. Is there something probably in their vocal cords that could warrant a checkup with their ENT?
First things first, it's very important that we provide a thorough history and physical examination in any patients who is hoarse or namamalat. It is important for us to ask for history of infection, vocal abuse, trauma, or previous surgery in the neck. In the clinics, the voice can be assessed by having the patient read on a certain text or paragraph and grade the quality of the voice according to scale. It is also very important that we take note about the timing and duration of hoarseness. Because for us ENTs, any hoarseness or pamamalat ng boses that is lasting for more than 2 weeks warrants further examination such as laryngoscopy.
Is there any instance, Dr. Enrique, na ang pagiging raspy ng boses ng isang tao, normal lang to? Kumbaga part of his character na paus ang kanyang boses, buong buhay na nilang meron silang paus na boses, or should this warrant a checkup? What I'm trying to refer to is, should they be concerned of anything such as maybe a polyp, maybe a cyst, or maybe a nodule?
Basically, if the patient has the same quality of the voice ever since, it is important that we take note of other diseases, maybe anatomic variations in the length or width of the vocal cords. But we must also rule out other causes such as lesions, nodules, cysts, and sometimes masses in the larynx.
You also mentioned some infections, Dr. Enrique, and one of that which is prevalent here in the Philippines is TB. Pwede rin bang, a lot of our viewers know TB as affecting the lungs, pwede rin bang maapektuhan ng vocal cords ang TB?
Yes, because we have what we call your TB laryngitis, because sometimes the infection or the TB cells, the TB bacilli, would actually go through the trachea and infect the vocal cords, causing ulcerations on the mucosa or lining of your vocal cords.
Now let's talk about voice used as a livelihood by a lot of people. And these are call center agents, professional singers, public speakers, teachers. Marami talagang trabaho that rely on their voice as their ways of livelihood. Ms. Zarina, pag-usapan naman natin yun. What is it about the voice care of some, let's put for example, professional singers who are able to sing in a concert night after night, tuloy-tuloy na buo pa rin ang boses, maganda pa rin ang boses, very, very healthy. But some people probably partied too hard the night before, the next day wala na yung boses nila. What type of mannerisms, maybe healthcare practices, should our viewers know about para ma-maintain ang magandang quality ng voice?
With regards to the frequency of drinking water, it should be, I would recommend to my patients to drink at least every hour. And then for the specific case that you've mentioned, singers are professionally trained, so it's really about vocal technique.
Okay.
So they may tend to avoid caffeinated beverages or alcohol. However, if you do drink those kinds of beverages, it would be better for you to balance the intake with water.
When it comes to our voice, a lot of us have been speaking all our lives, but meron bang tama at maling paraan ng pagsasalita?
There is actually, but it's really personalized from person to person. But my general tips would be to monitor your breathing, make sure that you have air support for everything that you say. Try not to speak at every end of your breath, so make sure that you try to breathe if ever you tend to speak for long periods of time. Also, try to monitor the pitch of your voice, since we're not really conscious about yung tono nga po ng ating mga boses. We may tend to speak at the higher end of our voice range or at the lower end of your voice range. So it's up to us to find what our optimal pitch is.
Okay, but Ms. Zarina, Dr. Enrique talked about kung yung power source ng ating voice, which is the air from our lungs. Where should most of that power be coming from? For a sustained voice use, especially those who, for let's say call center agents, it may be hard at first, but where should that power be coming from? The neck muscles, maybe from the diaphragm? Saan ba, Ms. Zarina, ang magandang paraan para mag-vocalize or gumamit ng boses?
It should be from the diaphragm actually, or more commonly, mas ma-monitor po natin siya sa ating bandang tiyan kasi dun malapit po ang ating diaphragm. You will know if you're breathing in an improper way. If you see neck tensions over here, nakikita niyo na po yung muscles niyan. Pero another good way for you to ensure that you're breathing through your diaphragm is to sit in a proper posture. If possible, try to maintain a straight posture whenever you're sitting or standing. So understandable na po na for right now, in our context, majority of the people are working from home. So if makita niyo po na may environmental modifications kayo magagawa, like the height of your table, the height of your chair, it would still be beneficial in the long term.
Later on the show, we'll share some tips with you on how to properly exercise your voice to be healthy as well as powerful. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. We're talking about today about your very valuable voice. We'll talk about some voice hygiene and your overall vocal health. Dr. Enrique, what should our viewers do in order to maintain their voice, avoid any of these problems? Should regular checkups with the ENT be part of their list?
Well, yes, no, especially for professionals who use their voice frequently, no, at least once a month or anytime if they feel there's a problem or throat discomfort. Because it is very important that we determine the cause of their hoarseness or pamamalat as early as possible.
When it comes to losing someone's voice, a lot of our viewers may have tried some home remedies here and there. Are there any home remedies to your knowledge na alam niyong medyo may effect din naman?
Treatment lang naman, no, for any patients with hoarseness or pamamalat is basically to lubricate the throat and voice rest. Some patients would try to drink lemon water or turmeric. And sometimes naglalagay sila ng parang luya sa dila, nagsisipsip sila. There's no basically proof that it works, but if they give them comfort, then why not? But again, it is still essential that they do the voice rest and increase their oral fluid.
One of the more serious ailments of vocal cord is that of vocal cord cancer. When it comes to vocal cord cancer, we have to be serious about this, Dr. Enrique, because how can our viewers be very wary about this? What are some of the telltale signs that should prompt them to seek checkups?
Number one, no, if namamalat ka or namamaos ka, that is progressive and lasting for more than 2 weeks, you warrant already a laryngoscopy. If you find lesions such as nodules or cysts, then we surgically remove that and send it to biopsy. On physical examination, madali namang mag-check if mukhang cancer or mukhang pre-malignant yung lesion. So pag ganun, we do biopsy and we treat it accordingly, either through surgery or radiotherapy or both. The very important thing to remember is that if hindi bumabalik ang boses ninyo ng mahigit 2 linggo.
Now, Ms. Zarina, when it comes to exercising our voice, meron bang mga exercises na makaka-benefit sa power or sa sustainability ng boses sa isang tao? I'm sure aspiring professional singers, maybe call center agents would benefit from anything that will strengthen their voice.
First off, when relaxation, it's really important to maintain a relaxed voice in order to produce a good voice. So some examples of relaxation exercises are just simple stretching of the neck, yung mga ginagawa po natin pa nag-warm up during workouts, like yung pag-stretch ng neck downward, upward, and even to the sides. You could also do a couple of breathing exercises in order for you to monitor if you're applying diaphragmatic breathing. So you could put one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach and just inhale and exhale and monitor if mas gumagalaw ba yun sa stomach mo, which indicates that you're applying more diaphragmatic breathing, and monitoring if there are any tensions in your neck to indicate if hindi ba efficient yung breathing pattern ninyo. You can also actually search on YouTube some vocal warm-ups. A lot of my patients find lip trills very easy to do since they follow those videos on YouTube, and I recommend that they do those lip trills before a vocally demanding task.
And with that, I'd like to thank ENT specialist Dr. Enrique Papa II and speech pathologist Ms. Zarina Lazaro for sharing with us your very valuable insights. We learned a lot from you both today, very important information with regards to our voice. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.